and welcome to this webinar delivered by the ISM Trust. I am Maria Visitiu and I am Member Engagement and Events Officer at the ISM, and today I am joined by double bassist John J. Williamson, who will explain the concept of online real-time music. Before we begin, we have a few points for you. You should be able to see us and you should be able to hear us, and there will be also a PowerPoint presentation that you'll see in a bit on your screens. But keep in mind that we can't see you or hear you. If you experience any technical difficulties, such as sound quality issues, please let us know in the chat box and we'll make attempts to resolve the issue. The webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM's website at ism.org/webinars. If you have any questions, please let us know in the questions box and we'll make attempts to answer as many of them as possible during the presentation. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to John for the presentation.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining and thanks Maria and the ISM for having me. I thought I'd start by just playing a sort of 2-minute video that I suppose summarizes / promotes the ISM video course which I've made over the past few months. And while that's playing, maybe Maria can launch this quick poll to see how many people who are watching are people who have just kind of stumbled on this for the first time today and thought they'd check it out, or people who have gone through some or all of the video series already and come armed with some questions, because that will dictate to a certain extent the balance of lecturing versus interactivity, I suppose, from my side. So please do vote in that poll, but for now I'll just share my screen and I'll play you a quick video. The music that you'll hear in the background of this video is recorded in real time over the internet, and the video is just a few clips from the video series. It'll be about 2 minutes long. I'm working with the ISM to make these videos on how to play music online in real time. The results can be really fantastic, the software you need is free, and the technical barrier is small. Okay, so you can now see the Ethernet is connected, and as you would know from the first video, we can't use Wi-Fi. There's no point in even trying. I read this information here because that's important. If I had an older version, I might need to use an older version of Jack Trip. Just unmute yourself. Yep. Hi Sam, this is Sam Lee, great jazz piano player, everybody. And he's going to run the same command as I just did, apart from it's going to look like this. So now, if Liam clicks his fingers in front of his microphone, he's going to hear in his headphones the signal that has come from him to me and then back. Okay, so Liam, go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's the second method, and that gives me, as I said, it gives me 2 tracks in Logic. One of them here, the piano one, is going to be glitchy, but I can use that as a sort of guide track to line up the pristine audio that Liam will send after. We actually connect to the Jamula server that I set up. They're both connecting to me, but they're not connected directly to each other. Both appeared in my graph window because they're both connected to me, but they're not appearing in each other's graph window. Okay, so that means that I have to handle the job of connecting them to each other. I'm going to do that by connecting the receive from Liam here to the send of Chris, and the receive from Chris to the send of Liam, like that. And now that means that over Jack Trip, all 3 of us can hear each other.
That the choir that you showed me were having was probably that they are either using a public server, which might be overloaded and probably isn't in the most ideal location.
Okay, so I'm just answering a quick question here that's already come in, just about the sound cutting out. So just replying. Okay, cool. The poll results are in, which is very helpful. Thanks. Okay, cool. So I can see from the poll that most people haven't looked at any of the videos yet. So this is going to be a kind of introductory thing for a lot of people, which is perfectly fine by me. So I think quite a few people, I won't bother doing a poll on this, but in recent months, potentially before that, you might have tried to see if you can play music with somebody online over Zoom, and it's very difficult to do. So you know, those of us who teach students online have had to come up with various strategies, for example, to get around that, but it makes it very tricky. So if you and somebody who's on a Zoom call with you, if you try to count a bar of 4 beats, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you have the other person continue the next bar in time as they hear it, and then they come back to you. You'll notice that there's a lot of latency or delay on Zoom, and it's perfectly fine for speaking, but it's tricky to play music. So some teachers that I know, for example, they have to have their students play along to something the teacher is doing, but while muted, so the student can play in time from their point of view, but it actually won't be in time if they try to send the sound back to the teacher. So there's all these kinds of issues which pop up just because of this delay or latency, which seems to be inherent in Zoom and in Skype and similar programs like that. So what I mainly want to get across to all of you today, particularly those of you who haven't yet seen any of the video series, is that with decent consumer level internet of the type that I have, and many of you will have, latency of 20 to 30 milliseconds or less is possible with the right software. So that doesn't mean Zoom, but it means some software that I can talk about today. And please ask me any questions if I assume too much knowledge or if I skip over something that you haven't heard of before. But 20 to 30 milliseconds is roughly the latency that you would experience if you were in a room with somebody a distance of 8 meters away or so. So this is the kind of latency, the kind of very small delay that can allow you to play in real time. And as you will have hopefully heard on the introductory video that I just showed you, that was myself and Liam Dunnicky on piano, Chris Maddock on the saxophone, playing perfectly well in time with a really nice feel, with no metronome and no kind of external coordination. We were just all hooked up to each other over the internet, playing together in real time. So that's the headline figure to take away, is that it is possible to do, and you should definitely look into it if this has any possibility of being helpful to you. For me, it's been really a godsend practicing with other people, because I'm a jazz musician, so it's very important not to just sit at home playing on your own all the time. And it's been helpful for teaching here and there as well. That's quite good, because it means I can teach in a way that allows me to click my fingers and have somebody play back to me in real time. So it can be really, really handy. So yeah, I'll get onto this Sarah Hards in a bit. That's just a question about what speed decent consumer internet would be. I'll show you that shortly. Okay, so caveats. Video is different. So real-time video is a very different thing to audio, and it's much more difficult to achieve. What I would usually do is use real-time audio and use a muted Zoom call at the same time if I wanted to have video. The other caveat is that I use a Mac. So that is what I focus on in the video series, but Windows works too, and there's lots of instructions online that cover that. The third thing to say is that obviously the reason that ISM and me saw fit to make a video series on this, and the reason that we're having a webinar about it, is that it's not completely plug and play. So it's not just like, open up Microsoft Word and type out a document and print it. But if you've used Sibelius or GarageBand, for example, to record yourself, or any kind of music or audio focused software, you have already overcome the technical barrier that is arguably bigger than the one that is involved in this process. So you really shouldn't be scared, and I've really gone out of my way in the video series to kind of make it so that you can really follow each step that I do and just do it one after the other, and it will work if you have the right conditions. I have a question here from Thora Kerr, just to say, would it work on FaceTime or WhatsApp rather than Zoom? The whole point is that this is independent of video. Okay, so FaceTime and WhatsApp and Zoom and all this kind of stuff, they do video and they do sound. The sound has too much of a delay to play music along to. What I'm describing here is a way to have a real-time audio or sound connection, and then you can combine that with a non-real-time video if you'd like to still talk to people. Rachel Hind, good question. It's on the ISM website. So I just Googled for webinars here. My webinar is here at the top. And if I click into that bit there, there's a link, I think. Yeah, here it is. So a link from this webinar page, from the page you found out about the webinar, to the video series. So it's in the members section of the ISM, and there are 6 videos of about 20 minutes each, which show you what to do. So yeah, I hope I've answered those questions, and keep coming with any more, because it's great for me to see what people are wondering about. Okay, cool. So those are the caveats, and as I said, the slides I'm showing you now are basically the slides that I used in the first video. So it was an introductory video that I was using. The core thing here to understand, and this is something that you need to understand if you're going to use this kind of software, is that there is a trade-off of latency, which means delay, versus glitches, and it depends on the internet speed. So hopefully most of you are experiencing quite a clear and smooth signal in terms of my video and my sound to you, because we're using Zoom. What's happening when we use Zoom is that the data that represents, my video and my sound is coming to you guys over the internet. BenRap, I'm not sure, but you can follow up with the ISM after that. I think hopefully they will be able to. Perhaps there'll be a kind of embargo period first of all, but I'm not sure what the plan is for that. Okay, so yeah, so Zoom and everything, they receive the data, but then they don't display it straight away, okay? Because what happens is the internet is kind of like the Wild West. Each individual packet of data that I'm sending along to you guys might get delayed or lost or so on. And what Zoom has to do, or Skype or whatever, is it has to buffer. It waits a little bit of time. So the data comes in, but then it waits, fractions of a second, but still some time for the next data to come in. So if I'm saying 1, 2, 3, 4, when your computer receives the data of me saying 1, it's kind of hanging around a bit and waiting before it displays that, in order for the next bit of data to have time to get there. Right, so that's a buffering process, just like you might have. Susan Ogden, that's a good question. Sorry, guys, I keep checking the Q&A. So what I'm talking about, it works on a computer, either Windows or Mac, but a computer as opposed to an iPad. Okay, so that's how Zoom works, and it presents a smooth experience, even if the internet is not perfect in terms of quality of connection, but it adds latency. So that's the trade-off, right? It's kind of you wait a bit of time for the data to come in, and that costs latency. It introduces delay, but it makes the experience smoother. Okay, now at the other end of this spectrum, we have software like Jacktrip, Jamulus, and SoundJack. So Jacktrip and Jamulus are the ones that I focused on in the video series, and these are much more seat of the pants, I suppose, in that the data that represents the sound comes over the internet, comes into the computer, and then is more or less immediately displayed. So what that means is that you have a chance of very low latency, so really low delay on the sound, and that's what enables you to have real-time audio connections between computers. But it means that if the internet is poor quality, or if there's sort of noise on the line or something, then you will experience audio glitches. So what I want to show you now is maybe just a quick recording that I took of some glitches, right? So I'll go into here, And this is an audio recording that me and 2 colleagues made. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear what I'm referring to as audio glitches. I'll just play that. Okay, so I'll stop it there. You just heard a few snaps and crackles and pops, I hope. And that is a symptom of the internet essentially losing bits of data on the way to the next person. Okay, but there is a way to record in pristine quality. So I'll show you that here. This is the same recording but without glitches. And again, this is covered in great detail on in one of the videos. Let's play that. Okay, so you can hear there's none of those snaps and crackles and pops. So what I want to just, emphasize from this is that there is this trade-off of latency against glitches, but it depends on the internet speed. If the internet is really good on your end and on your colleague's end who you're playing with, then you'll be able to get really low latency with very low glitching as well. If the internet is more mediocre but still okay, then what you can do is with these programs actually optimize the trade-off between latency and glitches. So that is one of the core concepts to understand, okay, is that if you have an experience the first time where you think, oh, this is a bit too glitchy, there's all these snaps and pops going on in my ears, it's too distracting to play. What the video series shows you is how to optimize that for your internet connections. So I'll just move on here. And finally, yeah, as I said, you can record glitch-free, so you can actually use it to make studio quality, or at least home studio quality, real-time recordings without any glitches. A few sort of mundane but important things. You can't use Wi-Fi to do this. Okay, some of you might have seen a connector like this before. This is what's called an Ethernet cable, and this plugs into your laptop and it plugs directly into the internet router in your home. The reason for that is that Wi-Fi, although it's very good, it introduces too much delay and too much loss of data right at the start of the process. So if you try to use Wi-Fi, you'll be fighting a losing battle from then on in terms of getting a good enough internet performance. So use an Ethernet cable, which costs less than £5, and plug it into your internet router. Turn off your Wi-Fi. I won't do that here because I'll lose the connection, but you just use Ethernet. That's what it's called. If you have a newer computer, particularly newer Mac laptops, they sometimes don't have Ethernet ports on the computer, but you can get, again, cheap adapters for Ethernet. So this would be USB-C, I think, to Ethernet. Again, it's easy to find out this information, and you can ask me if any of that it's not clear. So that's one of the key things. And then we had a question earlier on about how fast is fast enough in terms of internet speed. So what I would show you is how I'll do this. My internet won't be great right now because I'm streaming video to lots of people, as you can see. But I would just go into Google here and I would type Cloudflare speed test. Like this. There's lots of different speed test websites, but this is a good one. It's the first link that comes up here, and I would click on it. And I will ideally be doing this whilst connected by Ethernet rather than Wi-Fi, because that would give me the most realistic impression of my internet speed. By all means, you can do this at home now if you'd like, if you're following along, so to speak. But again, because you're using Zoom at the same time, it might be slower than it would be in optimal conditions. So the numbers here, this is the download speed. This is what people most normally talk about when they talk about the speed of the internet. And you would want this number to be, ideally 30 or higher megabits per second. So minus of course, high enough there. Upload speed, maybe higher than 10 or 15, something like that, because you have to upload data, so to speak, when you send your signal. So again, I'm okay there. But these ones here are also very important, and this is why I use the Cloudflare speed testing website rather than something else that's a bit more simple. Latency needs to be below 10, ideally, and the jitter similarly should be in the sort of low single figures like this. So all of these numbers affect whether your internet is going to be suitable for this, and it's by all means it's worth knowing in advance if you just have no chance with this by testing your Mike. I'll get onto that in a second about what software is being used, but it's all being recorded, so don't worry. Okay, fine. So you test your internet speed, and as I said, you just look for sort of these kind of ballpark numbers to see what you're looking out for. I have a question about broadband providers advertising their average speed. That's completely true. All that is necessary is that you have to look out for your average, each time you test your speed. By all means, do it a few times in the day, or whatever. It just needs to be higher than these numbers here. You should check what you're paying for, right? So if you have unusually low numbers for these, it could be that 5 other people in your house are watching Netflix, so you should ask them to stop. But it might be that your internet provider is not giving you the speed that you're actually paying for. And I've had success in the past by just ringing them up and saying, hey, you told me I'd have 50 Mbps for my download, but I've only got 5, and they fix something and then it works. So look for these kind of numbers. And again, this is what I'm covering here is in the first video of the web series, so you have a lot of different ways to go through this at your own pace if you'd like. Another thing is that if you've done home recording before, you might have used something like this, but you don't need to have one. Okay? This is just a USB audio interface, it's called. I plug that into my computer and it allows me to plug in a microphone. I hope you can see that in my video. So this is just an easy way to plug a microphone into a computer, and I use it, and it's great. This one is made by Audient, which is nice, good quality. But you don't need to use an audio interface. You can literally just use the onboard microphone of your laptop and the headphone socket. Headphones are not optional, so I'm using headphones right now. It's just what I always do. But for using online real-time audio, you should use headphones, just because it can be so annoying having kind of echoing coming back, especially when you're trying to get a real-time signal going on. Okay, and just to come to the software point that somebody asked, another key takeaway, as well as this idea of a trade-off of glitches versus latency, which depends on the internet speed. I guess the second key takeaway is that the software is more the same than it is different. There's all kinds of software for this, most of which is free. Jamkazam, people might have tried. Jamulus, Jacktrip is the one that I favour. SoundJack. There's really all sorts of stuff, because this was a sort of growth industry, I suppose, in the early stages of the pandemic. But the software all works on similar principles. So I would recommend to use Jamulus for a very quick, easy setup, which is explained in my videos. And I would recommend to use Jacktrip for a bit more of a hands-on way to tweak the balance of latency versus glitches, and to get a much more, to have the potential to get a more usable, professional, high-quality audio experience. So that's Jacktrip, and then the other slightly more user-friendly one is Jamulus. The reason I emphasize this point is that if you have internet which is too slow, or if you're trying to use Wi-Fi when you should be using an Ethernet connection directly to the router, no software is able to compensate for that amount of delay. Okay, so the people who make this kind of software are in a tricky situation, because they make quite simple programs. The operation is quite simple, the way it works, but it's completely at the mercy of something which is outside of its control, which is the speed and quality of the internet connection. Okay, so there's no point going around the houses trying all sorts of different software to try and improve things, because all you have to do really is understand that your internet needs to be a good enough speed, and that you need to be able to tweak the balance, latency versus glitches, and that is covered extensively in the video series. So I don't propose to go on about it now too much, because it's not the best forum in which to do that. But this is what I just said. There's 2 examples of software that are quite popular. Jamulus, a bit more user-friendly, less configurable, less tweakable, I suppose, and Jack Trip, which is a bit less user-friendly, but I cover every single step of setting it up in my videos, and so you can literally just watch what I'm doing. Judy, I'll come to that in a minute. So that's one of the key things. Okay, let's talk about recording briefly. We had a question from Judy Carr about how to record. This is covered in a dedicated video in the video series that I've made, so you can check that out. But you can use anything. Okay, so if you've recorded yourself at home, you might have used GarageBand or Cubase or Logic or anything like that. It's all good. But the software that allows you to actually send the real-time audio signal across the internet is independent of those things. So you don't have to record anything if you don't want to. But it's basically like, okay, so you'll have a connection between two people in the simplest case, right? And they'll be sending audio back and forth to each other in real time. And something that I explain in the videos is that, of course, there will be glitches on the audio to some extent. So there might be a few kind of dropouts in the sound, or a few snaps and crackles and pops and so on. But as you're playing, that won't be too distracting, and you can be playing along in real time to somebody, so that's good. If you want to then make a recording that doesn't have glitches on, what you actually do is you have each person record themselves locally at the same time as they're playing online. So I've got a recording here and a recording here, and then I combine them together. The reason for that is that each recording locally will not have glitches on, but they'll be able to be synced perfectly because of this real-time connection between the two. So this is explained in detail in the video. I don't want to blind you with stuff and try to make you remember stuff now, because you don't need to, but it's perfectly possible to record in very good quality with this method. Right, so yeah, we had a question from Sue Praxton. I'll just deal with that briefly. If your latency is higher than 10, could be lots of different reasons, probably because you're not connected by Ethernet to your router, so try it with an Ethernet cable. If it's still higher than that, by all means phone your provider and say to them, my latency is too high, can you try and get it to be reduced somehow? But it will depend. You know, if you're really out in the sticks, then you might just be out of luck, I think. Okay, cool. So I think, yeah, I'll just cover this topic briefly just to finish off these slides from the first video in the web series. And this is just to educate you briefly about the idea of a server. Okay, so the way that something like Jamkazam or Jamulus, something that is really user-friendly and tries to hide the complexity from the user, would normally work is that there would be an external server. This is what happens when you watch Netflix, right? Your computer connects to what's called a server. It's just a big bank of computers somewhere in in a warehouse, and the Netflix videos are stored on there, and they just get streamed to your computer. You can connect for online real-time music using a server like this, and what I'm trying to show here is a case where me and a friend both connect to a server, which is allowing us to send audio back and forth to each other. So you can see here that there are sort of two steps in the journey of a bit of audio from one person to the next person. It goes from the computer into the server and then back out again. But something that is actually ideal for really low latency, and I might do this if I was playing with one person or just teaching somebody using this real-time audio, is actually to have the computers connected directly to each other. Again, this is explained in detail in the videos, and the steps are shown what to do. But you can see here that in contrast to the previous scenario, now I have direct connection from one computer to the other. So there isn't a server in the middle, which is adding extra steps in the journey. And this is something that I explain in the videos, and it helps you to get a really low latency connection to give yourself the best chance of having success the first time. You can also, and this is explained in the videos too, you can add 3 people or more. So you can go up to large numbers if you want and see how you do. But what you'll spot in this diagram here is that if 3 people connect to each other, then suddenly each person has to have 2 connections. Okay, it's like a triangle, like I've shown here. And that can get a bit taxing for your home internet. So then the other option is to use an external server like this, and it's a bit more like a star. Okay, so now there is some external server somewhere, and everybody just connects to that, and it handles all the issues. So those are a few things to be aware of. Okay. Right, so that is the end of the sort of preliminary slides which I had made and which I covered in the first video. I'd like to invite people to kind of throw a bunch of questions at me right now, just while I kind of key up the next bit of stuff. So please feel free to type any burning questions in the chat, and I'll be guided a bit by that in terms of what I do next. Adrian, the answer is 1 hour, so up until 12 o'clock. Cool. Okay, so I think I will. I'll power on. I want to show you another example here. So I'll share screen in a moment, just to let you see this. This is a chap called Dan Tepfer, who works as a jazz piano player in London. Oh, sorry about this. I've got some questions that have just come in a bit late. Okay. Right, thank you. Okay, so 3 questions. So the first one is from Bernard Hunt, and so I'm answering this live. He says, I've heard of groups of up to 12 using online real-time music successfully. Is there a practical limit? So this is discussed in in one of the later videos in my series, so you can watch that. Practical limit, that's the question, right? So where does the limit come from? That's the key thing. What I will draw here, just on a post-it note, is a little diagram with a server in the middle, and then stick people connected to it. Okay, so the server here, right, that is the thing which is handling the it's receiving everybody's incoming connection. Notice there's no connection directly from person A to person B. Okay, so you can see here that most of the workload is on the server. Okay, this is why Netflix servers, for example, have very good internet connections, because they have to simultaneously serve thousands of millions of people, right? So let's say I have a server here which is running online real-time music. This might be a public server somewhere in London, for example. As soon as I add more and more people, the number of connections which the server has to field increases. Okay, so the practical limit, Bernard, to answer your question, depends on the quality and speed of the internet connection that the server has that you're using. So 12 people is quite a good number, and you could do that, for example, using Jamulus, which I talk about in one of the later videos. Something that a guy called Doug Hunt, which I assume is no relation to you, Bernard, he's a kind of whiz of a sound engineer, and he's done some very good online live streams using online real-time music. And what he recommends, and this is discussed in the video in question, is he recommends that you could actually have your own private server, okay? Because there's a distinction between having a public server, right, which is something that anybody can access. And in that situation, you might have loads of people connected to it, and you might have to mute everybody else apart from those people who you wanted to play with, right? You can see how that wouldn't be the best scenario for optimizing the speed, because it's a quite messy situation. Lots of people are using the same server. So Doug actually recommends having a private server, and it's quite easy to set that up. If you wanted to really push the limits and have high quality with lots of people, you could get a private server for £5 a month and set something like this up. So that's Bernard's question answered. Ben Rapp, would this work for a large ensemble? Yes, with the caveats from before. So the larger the ensemble list that you're using, the better the server that you're using has to be. Jamulus allows you to access public servers quite easily, and you can choose ones which seem to be close by to you geographically and seem to have low latency. But if you want a really high quality professional experience, you might have to get your own server. So I would recommend, really, this goes for all of this stuff. The first time you try it, don't say to your 20-piece orchestra, hey, keep your Thursday evening free and let's get this working. You should definitely just try it with one or two other people first of all, just because that will educate you about what needs to be set up, what kind of issues might come up, and it's already extremely satisfying. For me, I'm playing with people in real life now a bit more, which is great. But it's a lifesaver to be able to do this online. It's fantastic, and it does enable you to teach in a really good way. So I do use it for one-to-one lessons. So that's Ben's question. I hope that's satisfactory. Sue Craxton, I'm connected by Ethernet to an internet booster plugged into an electric socket. Yes, that will increase latency, certainly. I'm not sure how much, so you just need to test your internet speed. But the best, the key with this, right, is that you're not in control of the external internet. So you have to just hope that you have a good provider and that and that they give you the speeds that you pay for. But you are in control of your own house, right? And any step that you can take, like connecting directly to the router instead of going through an internet booster into the wall, any step you can take is going to be worthwhile because it's going to reduce the latency that you have. That being said, I have played with somebody who used a system like this and it was okay. Okay, so that's done. Susan Ogden, I use a Mac. Is an Apple laptop as good for Jamulus, etc.? A Mac is an Apple laptop, and the same thing. But Jamulus and Jacktrip both work on Windows as well as Apple laptops, so you can use either. But I, like many people, just happen to have a Mac laptop for this kind of stuff. Christina Sheriff. Let's have a look there. Can I just check Jamulus or equivalent is the server? So Christina, the way this is that Jamulus or equivalent is the software that you use. Okay, so maybe I'll just share screen briefly to show you what I mean. Try to open Jamulus. Let's try and do it. No, sorry. Okay, so Jamulus is a piece of software, right, that you open on your own computer. I haven't used it for a while, so I'm not sure if I've actually got it installed properly. So, yeah, I do. So it's a piece of software that you open, and then you have what are called clients and servers. Okay, so I would be in Jamulus here, and I am a client, so I need to connect to a server. And I can show you this right now. I would press connect just there, and try to pick a server with a very low ping time, which is very low latency. Okay, you can see there are a few different servers here. Maybe I'll try this one. This is a public server that I'm connecting to. So there could be other people on there, but there aren't at the moment. But then I would have all these things coming up here, sliders for the different people. So you can see how easy Jamulus is to get going with. It's just that you might have to look at the settings a bit, as I explained in the videos, to tweak the balance of latency versus glitches. So if you want a very quick primer on that, you would click on settings there, and it's something like this, the buffer size. Okay, I make it smaller. Buffers will give me lower latency, but potentially more glitches, depending on the quality of the internet. Whereas larger ones will compensate for glitches and tend to make it smoother, but they will introduce more latency. So you can have a decent go if you just test your internet speed, and then use Jamulus and just get somebody else to use it, and both of you try connecting to a public server. That will give you some idea of how you're going to do, but I really urge you to watch the videos, just because it explains the tweaking process in a bit more detail. And there's every chance that the first time you use it, you won't have the optimized settings, so you'll think, this is a bit crap, it's not really working, I won't bother. I know a lot of people who have done that, but just an hour or so watching videos and reading about it will educate you to become a bit more of an informed consumer of this kind of software, and to be able to make the small, quite simple changes that you need to do to optimize the experience that you have. So that's Jamulus and Christina. I hope that answers your question. Jamulus or Jacktrip or whatever. It's just a software that you use, and there are servers and clients within that. I have a final anonymous question. It's not a silly question, don't worry. Does everybody in the group have to download Jamulus or Jacktrip software? Yes, they do. Yeah. So each person involved has their computer, and they have Jacktrip installed if they're using that, or they use Jamulus installed if they're using that. Okay. Cool. So those are all the live questions that I have at the moment, but do keep them coming if you have any more. So yeah, I wanted to show you this example here from Dan Tepfer over there and Christine McBride over here. Now, this is a really fantastic use of this kind of software, because what they actually did was live stream concerts. And again, this is covered in the videos to some extent. You can live stream 2 people or more remotely in real time. So I'll just play this video. Fantastic, really good. So, you know, that is what's possible. These are 2 of the best jazz musicians in the world, really, in my opinion, and they're playing with no metronome, something that relies very strongly on rhythmic integration, and it's as if they were in the same room. I think it's really good. So let me go back to here. I just want to say it also depends on the type of music. I don't know what kind of musicians we have here in this chat, but some of the use cases that I've seen have been choirs. Okay, so you have, I don't know, someone said 12, some number of people who are trying to rehearse online using this type of thing. And for choral music, it depends, of course, on the music, and there's no blanket rule. But you might be able to cope with slightly higher latency than you would be able to for jazz. So that's where this trade-off that I spoke about is really crucial. Okay, if you have a choral situation and you're singing quite slow choir music that doesn't have a sort of tight rhythmic event taking place, then you might be able to get away with slightly higher latency over here, and that would mean that you can compensate a bit for people who have less optimal internet connections, and you can improve the quality of the experience that people have, so there'll be less glitches and so on like that. So it really depends on the type of music that you have to play. For me, as a jazz musician, I always chase after the very lowest latency that I can get, to the exclusion of everything else, basically. But you can by all means try it with a slightly higher latency, just in order to just in order to tweak it for the kind of software that you're using. So I have a question from Micah, which I'll answer live here. Different genres. Do I have any examples of orchestras or chamber music, classical music being rehearsed or performed using this software? Let me have a look. So there's plenty of videos on YouTube of orchestras or choirs or whatever being done with this kind of software. So I'm searching for Jamulus, Jamulus, and choir. And maybe I'll play something from the London City Voices here. You might have heard of these guys if you're into choirs in London. So I'm going to share my screen now. So this is not the best example, in my opinion, because they have slightly higher latency than they need to, I think. But it certainly works. So I'll show you this.
Go with us and do your
Sorry,
activities
guys.
in one place.
I don't control the YouTube
It
ads.
matters who you travel with.
Okay.
Hey, Steve Stein here, and if you've struggled with soloing because you don't know scales,
good. Can we do it again? Can you be aware of the delay and try and work against it? It's this trade-off about kind of working. You're trying to stay in time, but the main thing is listening to everybody as well and trying to kind of bring it all together. It's like alchemy, really. Let me just see if this works.
So, Rich,
Yes.
when you say that, do you...
But tonight there is one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're skipping along a bit. So tell us.
So,
See if they sing again in a minute.
So you're singing the harmony. You're going. There's
You preferred
somebody
it the
in the
other way,
bass
didn't you,
section.
I've been to a lot of rehearsals like this. There's more talking. Here we go.
Cool.
Okay, here we go. That's pretty good.
Altitudes. One. Ba 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 ya ya. Ha ba 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 ya ya. Try it for me. 1, 2, 3, 1. Sorry, I was throwing you off there. And again. 2, 3, 1.
Cool. Yeah, I'll pause that there. So what you can hear is a kind of all right example of online real-time music. It's not the best, is it? And because you can hear there's a bit of a delay, there's quite a few glitches as well. So I actually speak about this with Doug Hunt in the final video of my series. And the reason it's like that is possibly because they are using a public server. Okay, so this goes back to the idea of having a private server versus a public server. It's if I was in Jamulus, right, and I just connected to any public server that I could find, the chances are it won't be in the best location for me. There might be other people using it who are taking up some of the capacity. And so if you wanted to have a really sort of bomb-proof experience in terms of having a good server, you could look into having a private server. I think that would be really good. And it's quite cheap and easy to set up. It just depends on your priorities, really. You know, there are people who do paid gigs using this kind of stuff, and they employ somebody like Doug Hunt to get really high quality stuff set up. But there are people who just use it a bit more informally for rehearsing and just trying out stuff. And the example that I showed you there, using Jamulus with a bit of delay, might be fine for certain things, because it takes a bit of the workload out of setting things up. It's relatively plug and play, I would say. Cool. So I have a question here from Adrian. So he says they were using video as well as audio. Yeah, that's true. But again, I will show you a sort of post-it note diagram. Okay. What they were doing was using Zoom, but muting it. Okay. So all you would do, is something like this. You would have Zoom open on your computer, and you would mute the audio on Zoom. So I'll mute myself now. You won't be able to hear me. And what I said there was I'm talking and you can't hear me. So that allows you to have a video connection, so you can see people, which people like to have. But the audio is independent of Zoom. So they have Jamulus running at the same time, or Jackstrip on their computer, and that enables them to hear each other in real time. It does make certain types of conducting a bit more tricky, right? You can imagine if you're trying to rehearse a string ensemble or something like that, or even a choir, I suppose, which has the conductor giving super sharp rhythmic signals. Okay, that's not going to work because the audio is pretty much real time, but the video is not going to be real time. So if people try and follow the conductor visually, they'll be a bit stuck. But what I have seen people do very successfully is to have the online real-time audio and to follow the conductor visually, but only have the conductor doing quite, I don't know, not massively time-sensitive cueing. So they might cue dynamics like this or something like that, or just general atmospheres or moods, stuff that doesn't require an immediate response. So yes, you can combine online real-time sound with a Zoom connection, and that's what I usually do. There's no special setup needed to do that. You just have both of the programs open at the same time, so it's fine. I've got terrible hay fever, by the way. So you just have that setup, and it works perfectly well. I think that's a very good thing to do. But Zoom does take up internet bandwidth as well, right? So if you have internet which is just struggling along to work fast enough, then Zoom will affect that. And this is a question from Bernard Hunt, which just kind of, he says, running Zoom in parallel will still affect the performance of Jamulus because it uses your internet connection, and that's completely true. That's very, very true. So you'll notice that really if you go if you go to the speed test website that I mentioned earlier on in the talk, and you try running that speed test once without anything else going on, the second time while you're streaming something on Netflix at the same time, you'll notice a bit of an impact on your internet connection. And of course, it just completely depends on your internet speed, how many other people in the house can be using it at the same time, etc. It depends on that, whether the impact of using Zoom in parallel will take you below some kind of threshold that makes it impossible to use. And hopefully for you it won't. I'd certainly say most people who have good quality internet and are getting what they're paying for should be able to use Zoom at the same time as real-time audio, at least with a few people. And it's easier to just troubleshoot things when you're looking at another human face. Okay. So yeah, I think we're doing well there. Ben Rapp has to go, that's fine. Now, so I'm just kind of seeing how to spend the final 10 minutes of this, because obviously I can't go through all of my slides for all the videos because that's a few hours of material. So now is the time for any final questions. But I sort of hope that I have showed you or convinced you that this stuff, at least for a few people initially, just a one-to-one connection with a student, for example, or with a friend who you haven't played with for a while and you'd like to play along with them. This stuff is very doable to set up, okay? And if you think back to the first time you were using Sibelius, you might have hated it and found it really tricky, but what's the value of doing that? The value of getting through that barrier is being able to write out sheet music and print it and have it played, right? So we do it because it helps our careers and it helps our musical practice. The same thing applies here, I think. So the use cases that I know about are, as I said, for myself, just being able to play with other people and to maintain a kind of feel for rhythmic interaction with other people when it was at the height of lockdown. That's one thing. Another use case that there is to teach, so I could be playing something on the piano, something in time on the piano, and have a flute student or whatever it was playing along to it in real time. And that kind of is quite revolutionary, I think, because it removes the final respect in which online teaching is suboptimal. Obviously, we tend to prefer to teach in person anyway, but if you teach somebody who's a long way away, then you might never be able to get a real sense for how well they're thinking rhythmically and whether they're getting things right before you have this kind of online real-time connection. So I think that's quite an important thing to note. Other more professional use cases, I suppose, is doing recording. Okay, so it depends, but if you work in something like jazz, like I do, it's a curious thing because perfect timekeeping is a goal of all bass players and all drummers. We all want to be quasi-metronomic, I suppose, in terms of how we play. But the moment that you use a metronome to actually record, say, a multi-track recording, so if I record my bass track, the drummer does the drum tracks, the piano does the next one. If you do that to a metronome, it can really suck the life out of things. It's a curious thing, but it does. So a use case that I imagine for this is if you want to do a remote recording session, but you might want to have the foundations, like the bass and drums or the bass and drums and piano, recorded in real time. And that was what I did with piano and saxophone player. I just said, okay, we're going to record this in real time, and we used the real-time connection between us to make sure we played in time together, but then we recorded all of us at home at the same time, so we could combine those pristine recorded online tracks in real time. And the final use case I think is remote rehearsals as well. Okay, so if you're going on a tour, you have to use a different sub bass player or a dep. You can introduce them to the music by playing along with them in real time, rather than just waiting for the sound check and kind of trying to hammer through some music. I have a question here from Liz Liu. She says, John, in terms of using online real-time music for online teaching, is it relatively easy for younger students to swap between Zoom audio and Jamulus? Yes, I think without prejudging anybody, I think younger students will be streets ahead of most of us in this type of thing. They're very, very adept at using this kind of thing, and something like Jamulus, in here, I'll show you. Okay. I do recommend, right, people who are into this in a bit more of a serious way, definitely try Jackstrip, because it is, if you just follow my tutorial, which is very easy, you will be shown the configuration options and the tweaking that you need to get the optimal settings. But this is Jamulus. I open it, I look at my settings here, I notice the things which I can change. We talked about this buffer size earlier on. Down here it's more latency but fewer glitches, and then vice versa upwards. There are the buffers here, which can be auto, or I can, again with these guys here, higher always means higher latency, but with fewer glitches. Lower means lower. But this is all there is to it in a way. You just connect to something like that, and then you mute everybody else on the channel. Or you can set up a server on your own computer, which will give you better speed, and that's explained in the video too. But all you would do is just you'd have this on, and then you would just mute the Zoom call, which we've all done before. We need to take a phone call or something. So I don't think it's a massive technical barrier. It just needs a bit of time to set it up, and a bit of, I don't know. It's kind of like patience, I suppose. So I think the biggest barrier to adoption of this kind of thing is just that kind of initial technical barrier where you think, damn, I can't do this. It's too complicated. I don't know what all these settings mean. And that's the whole purpose of me making these videos, is just to explain why there are a few key settings that you have to tweak. And that's because of this trade-off between glitches and latency, which is unavoidable, and no software will get around that just by the way it's made. It gets around that by having settings which you can change. And I think once you get over that initial thing, from then on, thereafter, it takes you 5 minutes to set it up each time, and then you can be playing music with somebody as if they're in the same room. It's fantastic, and it was very emotional. Actually, I have to say, the first time it worked for me. So I hope that you'll be able to follow the video series, and by all means, I don't know if there's an official route for this, but I'd be happy to take a few email questions here and there from people who watch the videos. Just not too many. Cool. Okay. So I've got another question here. Okay, Christina Sheriff. If setting this up with a student, how do we assess the safety of choosing what appears to be a random server? Completely true. Completely true. And so what you can do there, if you don't want to be public, you can just run a Jamulus server on your computer. Okay, so this is this thing here, and that makes me a server, and there are just a few steps that you would have to go through to get the student to be able to connect to you. But yeah, that's what I do normally, is if I'm just teaching with somebody else, the benefit of using a public server is just this marginal increase in user friendliness that you can just click and go, sort of. But if you want to have privacy, to have connection over to have control over the connection, to have the best chance of getting really low delay on your sound, then I would recommend running a server. And there are a few settings you might have to change on your router. So if anybody's ever changed their internet password on their router, it's just that kind of level of stuff, but it's not very difficult. Okay, and that's explained in the videos as well. It's just a one-time setup. But yes, that's a good point, Christina, for various reasons, some of them to do with the quality, some of them to do with privacy and so on. I do recommend becoming able to set up a private server, which you can do just on your own computer. Okay, there's nothing special about it. It's just you make a server that's on the computer rather than out there in the world. So I hope that answers your question, Christina. Rachel Hind, similar kind of thing. would your communication be private? No. If you're on a public server, it wouldn't be. And that's kind of in keeping with the philosophy of the more user-friendly ones like Jamulus and Jamkazam. They all have this relatively cringy, in my opinion, obsession with naming their programs after jamming. You know, there's this idea that the servers are kind of public music rooms where you just go along and there's a guitar player in Germany and a keyboard player, you know, in France or whatever, and everyone's just having a good time. But for professional purposes, like we want to use it, most of us, I think, yes, it's good to be able to set up a server on your own computer, because then no, it can't be tapped by anybody else. You know, you wouldn't be reading your credit card details out over a Zoom call anyway, I suppose. But you know, yes, it's certainly a thing that you want to be able to. If you're at all serious about this, you want to be able to set up your own server on your computer, which is very easy to do, rather than always using public servers, because that will also give you a better chance of having good quality as well. And Philip Jones says, thank you, very much appreciated. No problem, Philip. Rachel, yes, I completely get that. Child protection, agreed. Yeah, so that's covered in the first couple of videos of the series, how to set up a server, and that's what I recommend people do the first time. So I'll leave it there and then open for any final questions that people have. Yeah, over to you, Maria.
Thank you. Thanks, John. That's been great and really inspiring, and we found out so many details. So I hope you're all really keen and looking forward to try online real-time music now. If there's any questions, yeah, please let us know. If not, we might end this webinar here. Just to remind you, it will be available on our website, hopefully from this afternoon, but if not, definitely from tomorrow, and you'll have the address in the chat just now. You can keep an eye on that on our website for any other webinars that we'll have coming up. And just wanted to thank you all again. Thank you, John. Thank you all for attending. I hope you will have a lovely rest of your day. Enjoy.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.